All right, so this is my conversation with Joseph Kyrlow. Joseph is a former Marines and a current professor at NC State University where he teaches philosophy. He enlisted in the Marines back when he was in high school, or after he graduated from high school. And then after his military career, which was rather brief, relatively brief, he chose to pursue a career in philosophy. And this is our conversation together, where we talk about his history, his interests in philosophy, and how he became a professor of philosophy at NC State University. I'm glad to have Joe on the show. He's a good friend of mine, and I'm very happy that we managed to record this conversation together. And I'm glad to have him with me here in the studio in the East Wing. So, Joe, I think we should call this the official start to our conversation, right? I want to welcome you to the East Wing.
Hey, glad to be here, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I honestly have been meaning to have this conversation with you on the show for a long time now, but I'm glad we managed to do it officially. Before I even begin, I do want to say that first off, I truly appreciate the friendship that we have, like truly, and I appreciate the effort that you've put in trying to get to know students and trying to build relationships. That's just very admirable. So thank you for that.
It's mutual. I was actually, I was telling my wife last night that I was coming to do this, and I was telling her about you. I was like, don't worry, you'll meet him. I want to have him over there. He's my buddy.
Oh, man.
No, it's mutual, and I'm glad fate brought us together that day when I was out on the green and I looked over the wall and saw you there, and we just struck up a conversation.
Right,
so.
Yeah, and you had this awesome pipe, man. That's Gandalf vibes type thing. Yeah. But before, we cut to the chase of this conversation that we're having that's probably going to be very organic, I do want to maybe go back just a little bit to highlighting a few things about your background, and I will definitely let you actually weigh in on a couple of these things that pertain to your background and your upbringing and things like that. But at the same time, just for the sake of sort of familiarizing the audience with who I'm talking to, can you tell us a little bit about what you did before becoming a philosophy professor here at NC State?
So I had no interest in school when I was in high school. Maybe as a younger kid in elementary school, the beginning part of middle school, I was studious and I cared about my grades and would always do my projects. And then kind of towards the end of middle school and high school, it was sports. Like I was a soccer player and on traveling soccer teams and my friends and girls and parties, and kind of didn't really care at all for school. I perceived it as a waste of time. There was one teacher that I had that stuck with me, and I'm still in contact with him, Sam Anderson. I felt cared, and he was inspiring, and he treated us as people. He would call us Mr. and, Mrs.
Wow.
He would just show us respect and treat us as people as opposed to like he's there babysitting us or something. And he made a mark on me, and he inspired me and some of my friends. But beyond him, I didn't really have anything of interest at school besides friends and parties and sports. And so, I knew for me, college wasn't an option.
Yeah.
Neither of my parents went to. My mom did some community college, but my dad, I think, he dropped out of high school in 11th grade, and he was a motorcycle mechanic. My mom was a secretary and a waitress and did jobs like that. And so even if I didn't want to go to school, but even if I had wanted to go to school, I wouldn't have really had the means to go to school.
Right.
And so, I just was in that lifestyle of partying and was going down some dark paths, and I knew the only way out for me was the military. and I had always for a long time I'd wanted to be a Marine. I was always interested in like warriors and that kind of culture. And so I don't even think I told my mom, but I turned 18 in my senior year in high school in November, and somewhere along the line, I'm 18. I don't need a parent's permission. I went to the recruiter, talked to the recruiter, and he got me set up. And I went down and filled out paperwork. I forget if I took the oath at that point, and I came back like on a weekend. I was like, I joined the Marine Corps.
Oh my God,
Mom! And so I didn't initially go in right after high school. I took the summer off, which I probably shouldn't, because there was plenty of opportunities to get into trouble and cause a ruckus with my friends. But somehow someone was looking out for me, and I escaped troubles and made it in, shipped into boot camp. It would have been the fall. It was November 9th of 1998, which was a couple days before my birthday, which is the 13th.
Wow.
And then the next day is the Marine Corps birthday, November 10th. So by the time I actually got to the Marine Corps base, it was the Marine Corps birthday.
And, what a time to be there.
Yeah, exactly. And, I can't remember any of the jokes, but the drill instructors were, it's like a happy birthday. It
Nice.
wasn't a warm birthday party
Oh,
for
man.
the first day there, but that's it. So I wanted to be a sniper.
Ugh.
That's what I had wanted to do. And, when I grew up, I'd seen Full Metal Jacket and Rambo, and those were my heroes, and Bruce Willis and Die Hard.
Yep.
And so my family had my dad's side, my grandparents. Only my grandmother was alive at the time, but they had like a little 35-acre hobby farm, and we would just we would shoot there on the weekends when I'd go over there. And I fancied myself a decent shot, and I read books on Carlos Hathcock was a famous Marine sniper, and I had some videos about him, and that was just my dream, to be a Marine sniper.
Good Lord.
And so the recruiter's like, well, the fast track way to become a sniper is to go recon.
Oh, yeah.
And so I signed up to be reconnaissance, and just didn't work out the way I wanted.
Ugh.
I wasn't able to pass the NDOC for it, and it ended up becoming what's called open contract.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, because I essentially violated the terms of my contract by not being able to meet the requirements, and so, they let me pick 3 other alternative jobs, and I got none of those.
Oh my goodness.
When when it come down to what I'm actually going to do, it was amphibious assault vehicle mechanic. And so that was the rest of my life in the Marine Corps. And I mean, I ended up, I don't say I liked it, but it became more tolerable. And the Amtracs, the amphibious assault vehicles, they're a special part. There's a lot of pride amongst the trackers, as they're called, because that's what, it's by means of the track that the Marines come off the ships and make it to the shore.
Right.
And so it's a vital part of the Marine Corps, and that's where I ended up. And so I did that for 3 3.5 years or so, taking into account the different schools, and I met lots of good friends along, and there was actually lots of recon washouts.
Oh God! So they made it to your unit.
Yes,
Okay.
we got a lot of us got put as amphibious assault vehicle because no one wanted to sign up for that MOS for that specialty, and so there was a pool of a couple of us that had similar stories, but I mean that was good because we were of the similar mindsets and stuff, and had the similar dreams, and we were able to bond over watching those dreams wash away, and so I got out in August of 2002, and they let me get out a few months early because I shouldn't have got out till November, but they gave me what was called a school cut.
Oh.
To where my command granted me you can get up to 3 months, and they don't do it for everyone.
Yeah.
But that,
You're very special.
They liked me. I don't mean to put it that way, but I did. I was a sergeant. I made it to sergeant, and I had a good reputation, and especially amongst amongst everyone, but some officers that appreciated me, and they were looking out for me and set it up so that I could get out early, because with the school cut, if I got in November, I would miss the whole fall. Got out in November, I would have missed the whole fall semester. And by letting me get out in August, I could start school.
Right.
And so, I told you I had no interest in school before. And so it was after I had been through the Marine Corps and, going through all that I thought, you know what, maybe school's not that bad. So, and now I had the money.
Yeah.
Because I had the GI Bill.
Oh, nice.
And I had the discipline. I had the discipline to do it. I didn't have that younger self of me in elementary school and middle school was lost. That cared about that, was disciplined and did my work. That was lost. And, I attribute the Marine Corps with helping me refine that part of myself and instilling in me the discipline that really, when I got out, I felt like I could do whatever I wanted, because I I really became a master of myself, and in there I had the discipline to learn guitar and really that's the biggest thing that I got, I think, from the Marine Corps was discipline, the ability to set a goal and to keep yourself on track to attaining that goal by minimizing distractions, whatever that may be coming, just putting your freaking head down and driving forward and driving on. And that was the attitude at which I hit college, this little community college in Northeast Maryland called Cecil College. And
Cecil College, okay.
That's right. So I don't know if I'm going into too much detail here. If you want me to keep going.
This is very good. I really, before you even keep going, I think there would be a few things I would love to maybe unpack with you here that I think would be worth highlighting, especially for our audience. When you left, like you spent approximately 4 years in the military, so that's like wrapping up, for all intents and purposes, wrapping up one's college journey, undergraduate journey. So that in those 4 years, so much can happen, right? Like you experience a lot of change, you learn a lot about yourself, there's a lot of growth, and you start to realize that, there are things you learn about yourself that you could adjust, maybe you can tweak, or there are areas where you can improve. And I'm wondering, during those 4 years, how much of a shift was it for you to transition from a kid who was perhaps very much interested in partying and being wild, and then finding yourself in a place that is all about instilling discipline and wanting you to be the best version of yourself, And I might even add, I think in the Marines, you're not always very well resourced, right? You're expected perhaps to do a lot for less.
That's right.
You have to sort of overcompensate.
Yeah.
So how difficult was it for you to get into that mindset, after realizing that for the longest time, maybe you were more inclined into adopting a party-like lifestyle?
Yeah. Not hard at all, sir.
Oh, my.
No, because you're scared as shit in there.
Oh, my goodness.
It's a culture shock. It's like, yes, sir. Do you want me to do this? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That was my experience. I'm a tall person. I'm 6'4". I'm skinny, but still, it's like usually bigger than everyone and semi-athletic, but it's a whole nother crop of human beings in the Marine Corps,
God.
both in terms of the people that you're around and in the terms of like the other recruits or the other Marines and the actual they're top-notch physical fitness and so you just get humbled really quick. Really quick. I did anyway, and so it was all a haze. It's just I had set myself. Oh, I guess another part of it too, Abdul, is that I didn't want to. This would have been pride too. There was no way in fucking hell that I was gonna not make it through boot camp.
Yeah.
There was no way. I would return back home. I'm going to be a Marine. I'm going to be this and that and not do it.
Right.
And so it wasn't an option not to conform and throw down with this is the life I've committed to and this is what I'm seeing forward. I feel like I snapped into conformity pretty quick.
Oh, yeah.
Out of fear, out of pride, and out of having these goals that I sought to attain of, ultimately because it didn't work out.
Right.
It didn't fully work out, but, I sometimes think because it was very devastating to me when I failed to meet the standards for recon. And I remember on the bus ride home, I just was like, my life is over. But, my dreams were gone. Those things were washed away.
Yeah.
However, who knows? I could have been recon. And you know what? If I ended up being recon, you and I wouldn't be here together.
That's
I wouldn't be
true.
married to the woman that I'm married to. I wouldn't be, anyway, it's still probably possible, but it's highly unlikely that my life would have panned out in the way that it has. And I like that I'm right here talking to you, my brother.
Yeah,
and
I love that.
I love my family, and I wouldn't trade them for anyone and the friends that I have. So it was through that I eventually get here. So the transition wasn't. It was survival for me.
No, that's. I love that. There's always it's never. You always have to look at things from maybe a 360, 180 perspective. Yeah. You can have a path or a goal in life, but you have to also be prepared for the moment when that might not work out.
That's right.
And there's, there might be something else open for you.
That's it. And so, this is with some of the philosophers that have inspired me and that I teach.
Yeah.
And I think this is bound up with Buddhist teachings too. When you love things that are changeable, or you're acquiring them requires resources and things to be happening in the external world besides just your own mind, you're binding yourself to suffering because you may have the things that you seek and lose them.
Right.
And what is it to suffer but to lose what you love? And so I had I had wedded myself to a certain dream of something that I wanted to be, but there was no guarantee in me having that. All it was a dream.
Right.
But I wasn't thinking like that. I was thinking I'm going to, I didn't consider that possibility. Maybe you have to be like that to try to do something like that. But it's through that and other experiences, it's made me aware how lucky we are when things do go our way in this world, and to be prepared and to learn how to handle and move through when they don't.
Yeah. I'm also very impressed with the way you found another purpose in life in addition to perhaps a worldly purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe your worldly purpose is to make good connections with people, to build relationships, and perhaps to spread some level of positivity. And maybe your outwardly, if that's a word, outwardly purpose is to, have maybe eternal life, if that makes sense. So that, you've maybe during the time when you were applying to become a recon officer, I don't know if that's...
Oh, I was enlisted. Yeah, so I was enlisted. Yeah. I wasn't the fancy pants officer.
Yeah.
All the love to the officers out there, but, you got to get the college education first to be the be the officer.
Yeah. But I mean, it's interesting because I'm sure during that time you didn't have as nuanced a perspective as you do right now about, I guess purpose and what is the meaning of it all. And
I didn't.
Yeah.
No, it was to glorify myself.
Okay.
That's I wanted to be this. That to me was the coolest thing, and I wanted to do that for myself.
Yeah.
And so that certainly changed, and now I think, I conceive of my purpose is ultimately to help others become their best self.
Yeah.
And to come closer to the good and the true in their own lives. That's my mission.
Yeah.
It's to make, the way I frame it is to make soldiers for God. So wanting to be a soldier for, man, to put it that way, I think there's a greater kind of soldier one can be, and that can be a soldier for the good and the true.
Yeah.
And that's what I think a philosopher is. Ultimately, is a soldier for the good and the true. Mm. And what's the greatest? When I think about it, to me, the greatest thing that we can attain is helping our brothers, helping our brothers and sisters become better. And that's not to say I'm complete in any way. I'm flawed, but to recognize that you're on this journey towards coming closer to the higher and the most important things, and finding others to inspire and to help inspire you and work together towards that goal as one platoon, moving towards making their way closer to the good. That's what it's about, and that's how I conceive of my role as a philosophy professor. I take it very seriously. It's a kind of religious duty.
Yeah. And how does one? When is it? Let me see if I can phrase that right. When did you arrive at the conclusion that this was your purpose in life, or did you, or was it a gradual process where you were immersed in the world of philosophy, you were learning, you were adapting, and then over time you realized that, okay, I think this is actually what I really want to do. This is my purpose.
So let me, it's going to take a minute.
Yeah, no, so hash it out.
So let me go back to when I get out and I start at the community college. Yeah. So when I was in, we were out at 29 Palms, California, at doing this joint exercise. It's called CAX, combined arms exercises. And now I think they call it like Mojave Viper. I don't know. It's a different name, but when I was in, it was just referred to as CAX. And so I was out there with the tracks, and we're in the desert, living in these big tents, or living in the tracks and doing exercises, driving through the desert. There's various ranges and just working with different units. And there was this communications guy on the tracks, and his name was Ryan Dupree. And he and I used to play chess. Like, we brought a chessboard out in the desert, and we would be playing chess. Anyway, we're out there. It's a couple months we're out there training, and I wanted something to read, and I knew Ryan had books. And so Ryan had this I'd see he walk around in his hip pocket of his camouflage utilities. He'd have a book like sticking out, like he opened the flap and stuck a book in there. It's like, hey man, I want a book. What do you got there? He's like, oh, I got some books, but this is Plato, and you're not ready. You're not ready. You're not ready for Plato, Joe. So he ended up giving me another book to read, which was a fantasy book, and didn't think I was into that, but it was about this. It was called Weave World. It was about this world that was weaved into the carpet, and people were fighting over this carpet. When you took strands out, the things that were weaved into the carpet would manifest themselves in reality. And there's just this war going on over this carpet, but it was a larger, it symbolizes a larger war. Anyway, so I was thinking, that son of a bitch, Ryan, saying I'm not ready. I knew he was taking. While we were in, he had took, when he got time on base, I think a course in philosophy. And so, that had been stuck in my mind. Like, what is, and it just sounded cool to me. It's like, what is this? This guy's saying I can't read it. And so when it always stuck in my mind in Plato, this idea. And so when I got out and I started going to this community college, I had some friends that were still in the area because the college was in my hometown, and they were going to this college, and they're like, you got to take a class with Dr. Bauer. Dr. Bauer this, Dr. Bauer that. And then so I looked up what Dr. Bauer was teaching in the spring, and I saw philosophy 101, and I thought, there you go. I get to take, everyone's telling me, he's like a local legend and very influential and beloved by his students. And so I signed up for this class in the spring, and it was probably the first or second class of listening to him talk and just being blown away by the ideas, not just the ideas of the philosophers, but like his generalship, like his marshaling of the students and the passion with which he taught.
Yeah.
I said to myself, I want to do this. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so I told him, as I got to know him, I told him, he was another one like Sam Anderson, my English teacher, that was personable. Would treat us like persons, and in the class, he was a marathoner, so he would run marathons, and he would tell us about the races he's going to run and this and that. And he would dog us. He'd say, he was in his 60s, like, you young punks, I'll run you all under the table. He's like, I'm running a 5K this weekend if anyone wants to run with me, and he's like, anyone think they can keep up with me? And I raised my hand. He's like, all right, Kyrlow, come out. And so I started running these races with him and struck up a friendship with him. And it was, after that I said, Paul, this is, or Dr. Bauer, it's what I would call him at that time. This is what I want to do. And he said, all right, I'm going to help you.
Oh, wow.
And so he bought me books. I asked him, I said, what are the 10 most important books I need to read? And among them was Plato's Republic. Ryan would let me read. So he gave me a list with 10 books, and he's like, I'll buy them for you.
Wow.
And he bought me the books, and I started reading through them, and I started taking, he taught ethics. He taught everything: ethics, anthropology, psychology. But I took all his philosophy courses, and it further solidified to me that this is what I want to do. And now I know I'm going somewhere with this, Abdullah. What was the final thing where we were headed? What was it that the question was?
It was the realization, when you realize that this is actually what I want. And this is it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then it's it. We've hit it. It was Paul Bauer.
Man.
Dr. Bauer, who inspired me through his teachings. And again, it was early. I'm talking second or third class.
Wow.
Where I thought, this guy's special. This topic is special. And this is what I want to do. It was that.
Man, so I want to maybe touch on something that I think is very, you might, I'm sure is near and dear to your heart.
Yeah.
And I want to see how much of it can be, how much of it you can find in some of the philosophical ideas that you're exposed to. So give me a minute here to sort of unpack this,
Sure.
and then I want to hear your thoughts. So, you have started. You said you realized that this is what you want to do early on, maybe 2 or 3 classes in that community college with Dr. Bowers, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm sure during that time, maybe you didn't even know what PhD students do or what it's like to be on a PhD program. Maybe these things you weren't very much aware of.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I had no clue what that meant.
All right.
I didn't know what grad school was. None of that. That's right.
Yeah. So I reckon during that time, your interest far outweighed the ambiguity of the process. Like you were way interested in the ideas and how the process looks like of getting into like a PhD program. You're like, I'm really invested. And here, I would be interested to hear your thoughts on some of the ideas that you were exposed to that may have inspired your faith journey, or how maybe your faith journey inspired your gravitation towards certain philosophical ideas.
Yeah, it would have been the other way around.
The other way around. Was it a former or the latter?
I think that the philosophical ideas were a major part of the faith journey.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
So I got so another way Paul helped me was he had contact with Freeman Harbrowski, who's another great man and was the president of University of Maryland, Baltimore County, which is where I ended up going after the community college. And Paul had met Dr. Harbrowski, or had listened to Dr. Harbrowski speak and wrote him afterwards about how inspirational his speech was. And Freeman wrote Paul back and said, look, I offer a transfer student scholarship. I respect you and the what you said about my speech and how it inspired you. Let's work together.
Wow.
Let's work together. And so he said, you can pick one student a year and they have to meet these criteria, and I will give them basically a full ride to UMBC. And so Paul, I did the things I had to do. I had to get the degree at the community college with a certain GPA, et cetera, et cetera. And so Paul wrote Freeman and said, hey, got a guy for you. And Freeman said, granted me the transfer student scholarship. And so I ended up going to UMBC. And there I majored in philosophy. And actually most of my time was spent doing ancient Greek.
Ooh, okay.
And because you have to learning more about what this is going to involve.
Right.
You got to study a philosophical language, especially if you wanted to study Plato or, the ancient philosophers.
Or the New Testament, too, because
That's
it was
right,
written
the New
in
Testament.
ancient Greek.
And exactly. And while I was there, I actually took a class. It's called Koine, in Koine Greek, when I was at UMBC. And so I met lots of influential people there. Probably two of the most were Sue Dwyer, who's now at College Park. She was the chair of the department, taught ethics, and taught me a lot. And Zena Hitz, who was the ancient philosopher there and really inspired me and kept going that love for ancient philosophy. We read some Aristotle and Greek together.
Wow.
And worked on some of that. And so around that time, I was graduating with the degree from UMBC. I married Paul's daughter, Dr. Bauer's daughter.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and exactly. And who is in many ways in the background in all that I do in helping me and keep me on the straight path. And I can't thank her enough for all her support she's giving me. She's a big part of this journey and the wonderful kids that we've had together and all the hard work she does. But anyway,
I love that. Shout out to the family,
that's
the
right.
entire
Shout
family.
out to the family. I love you, hon. And I love, my sons, Joey and Emil. And so I get the degree, the undergrad, and I had just been married. I should be applying to grad schools. However, my wife had a good paying job at University of Delaware, and it was like a new job. So it was like, okay, I'm going to follow her.
Yeah.
Follow her here. And she was at University of Delaware, and University of Delaware didn't have a philosophy graduate program. They had a really good undergraduate program. But they don't have a grad program in philosophy. So I was like, what can I do here to keep furthering my development in philosophy? And I figured the next best thing was this program they had in linguistics and cognitive science.
Wow.
There's philosophy of language and philosophy of mind. I still would have, and so a lot of the cog sci classes were cross-listed with philosophy classes, and so thought this was way. And also Sue Dwyer at UMBC, who was influential on me. She got me interested in Chomsky.
Oh, Noam Chomsky.
That's right.
Yeah.
And his, not the political stuff, but like he's a first-rate linguist.
Yeah.
And so she was basically trying to take some of his ideas about how we acquire language and apply them to how we acquire morality. Right? So this is kind of the C plus version, but how we come to know a grammar of a language by which we produce only in all grammatical sentences. There's what's called the linguistic analogy. You can take these ideas that he has about language and what it is and how it's acquired and put it in other domains like ethics. Like, how do we acquire the principles by which we make moral decisions? Where do these come from? Are they innate? Are they extracted from the environment? Nothing's innate. Is it some combination? And so she had been working on that. And so to understand what she was trying to do, I was reading lots of Chomsky. And with my study of ancient Greek, I had picked up some grammar, understanding of grammar beyond just the grade school stuff. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go further into linguistics and then this cog sci stuff, which overlaps with philosophy. And so I ended up doing the master's in that. And while I was doing the master's in that, Paul had started slowly cutting back his classes. And as he would cut back the classes that he was teaching, he would give them to me to teach. So the first one was a summer class in at the community college, and he said, "You want to teach, intro to philosophy this summer. And that was like, I had to put my money where my mouth was because I was scared shitless. Honestly, I didn't feel that I was ready, but I said, let's do it. And so I started teaching there. And as I was working on the master's, and I had, I got good reviews and ratings, and the administration liked me. And they're like, you've taught a couple classes here. What is it you want to teach? Right? What is it that you're interested in teaching? I love
that question.
That's right. And I said, philosophy of religion.
Nice.
Not because I was a religious person, but because quite the opposite. I would say I was pretty antagonistic to religion. And I wanted to give the religious people a hard time. So again, not the best intentions. And I say this tongue, and I was interested, but I did genuinely oppose lots of the ideas. And so I thought, okay, I'd like to, they said, okay, you teach philosophy of religion. And then I thought, well, shit, I'm never, I was one of the, it's so hubristic of me. I was just so vehemently opposed to religion, thought they had it wrong. What did I know about religion? Nothing. Right? And so I thought, well, I guess I got to, I'll audit a course in philosophy of religion at University of Delaware while I was at, in the master's program. And so I ended up, the philosophy of religion course was full, but there was medieval philosophy.
That's interesting.
Exactly. And some of the people who knew me in the Cog Sci program, they said, and they knew my disposition to be anti-religion and against religion. They said, well, you don't want to take a class with the woman who teaches that class. She wears a little cross around her neck. She's very religious. Her name was Kate Rogers. And I thought, I don't really care. I just want to learn what the arguments were. And I knew enough to know that the medievals were very spiritually minded, and their philosophy was dominated by argument, spiritual issues. Okay. And so I audit this medieval class with Kate Rogers, Dr. Rogers, in order to build my own philosophy of religion class. And from day one in Kate's class, I absolutely loved her.
Man.
And she loved me. And as I was listening to the arguments that were being made, I thought, boy, I had no idea how sophisticated and subtle and beautiful and rigorous these arguments were. We were talking about, there's arguments not just for the existence of God, but she was heavily engaged in what's called philosophical theology or perfect being theology.
Yeah.
The idea is this would be theology that is distinct in a certain sense from biblical theology. So you're trying to understand God not by going to the Bible or some holy text and seeing what it says about God, but by starting from the idea that God is a supremely perfect being, right? And working out what the implications must be, what other truths you can discover about God, given that you're starting with this definition of God as a supremely perfect being. So technically, you didn't even have to believe in God in order to engage in philosophical theology. You just had to understand that definition of God, and you had to be able to make, so you could say, if God exists, this is what God's nature would be, given that he's supremely perfect. So for example, if something was supremely perfect, then it couldn't be corrupted. Right? You couldn't destroy it.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you can deduce from that therefore God is not a physical thing, because if God was a physical thing, you could dice him up and blow him, all this, cut him up and stuff like that, and corrupt him in a certain way. But that, given that God is supremely perfect, he wouldn't be corruptible in any way whatsoever, either physically or in your mind. You couldn't even pull him apart. So he had to be absolutely without body, right? And so at that point, it doesn't commit you to believing there's such a being, but you're engaging in this meditation basically on what a supremely perfect being would be like. And so I was taken in by this way of coming at God and trying to understand God. And probably the majority of the great philosophical theologians in the past, like Augustine and Anselm,
Aquinas, maybe.
Yes,
yeah.
would take philosophical theology and biblical theology to be compatible. Like the truths that come out of both, they would be consistent, but the point is you're not starting from, well, the text says this, therefore this is what God's like. You're starting from the idea of the perfect being. And so I thought that was really beautiful and interesting. And Kate, the professor of this medieval class, she knew that I eventually after I got the master's, that I wanted to get the PhD in philosophy. And she said, well, look, you're a great student. I love talking with you, but like, I've never seen any of your writing, but I want to help you get into grad school. So like, write something for me so that I can, basically be one of your letters. I didn't even ask her. I didn't say anything about it. She just came to me and was like, look, I want to help you. I want to see how you can write. I want to help you get into grad school, but I got to see how you can write. So write one of these essays that I've given to the students. She gave them a list of papers with possible essay topics. And she's like, pick one. Obviously I'm not getting a grade because I'm just auditing her course. I'm just basically sitting in. And I thought, this is good. And so I read through the list and I saw this question and it said, what is Augustine's argument for the immortality of the soul? I thought that's cool.
Yeah.
And so I thought I'm gonna write on that. And I just went deep into it and I wrote this paper, 20, 30 pages. I don't know how I did it, man. I think this is the beginning of some kind of grace or divine. I don't know how to do it. I've never been able to write like that before or since, and it just came together.
Wow.
And I know Kate was praying for me now, but it came together, and I showed it to her, and she's like, "You can publish this."
Wow.
And that wasn't even on my radar. And I did.
Nice.
It got published. It's in American Catholic Philosophical Quarterly.
That's interesting. I gotta look that up.
Yeah, exactly. And it's called It Doesn't Concern You, Rejecting Augustine's Argument for the Immortality of the Soul. So, something like I wrote it back in 2013 or 2014, so it's over a decade ago.
All right.
Okay, so got published, and I just, through reading Augustine and writing that paper and seeing him make these arguments that there are these eternal truths. See, I would have thought I was a full-on physicalist at the time. All there is the sensory world. That's it, the physical world.
Yeah.
This talk about, these non-physical things, it's like, give me a break. That's kind of the stuff that was antagonistic to me.
Yeah.
Or to my disposition at the time. And so I came and trying to figure out his argument. It was focused in part on the existence of these eternal truths. And I thought, you know what? I can see these truths. Like 2 + 2 is 4. That is not something that we make up. It's not something that we can change. And it can't go away. It's always been 4. Yeah. It is 4. And it can't but be 4. Now, you may say, well, there wasn't always language, so it only came into being when the language came in. So maybe it was created when language. But I'm not talking about the thing, the locution 2 + 2 is 4 that you're hearing in your ears or that we write on the board. That's not the truth. That's a representation or a symbol of the truth. That truth has always been there. waiting to be articulated in written or spoken language. So and there were certain moral claims which he said were eternal truths, like it's better to be just than unjust. And there were logical truths. So if A is B and B is C, then A is C. That's always been true. Can't but be true. And you can't destroy that. Like, even if, I don't know, the whole physical world went up in ashes, guess what? 2 + 2 would be 4. And if A is B and B is C, then A is C.
Right.
And it's better to be just than unjust. And I thought, okay, if I could think of God as like these eternal truths, maybe I could say I believe in God. So that was like the first, one of the major steps along the way.
Yeah.
There's no way in heck at that point I was ready to throw down anyway with Christianity or any particular religion. It's just like, wait, I really, okay, there are these eternal truths. There is an eternal realm. So there is, and none of us are eternal, so they're not like mental things, and all the physical world is changing and corrupt. So there's got to be this other reality that is not contingent upon human beings, and it's not physical.
Yeah.
And so, I ended up teaching the class in philosophy of religion and sharing these arguments with it was instead of being antagonistic, like I was brought in by a lot of I thought, aren't these cool? And it was a great experience. But so the paper's published. Kate writes me the letter. She helps me get into Purdue. And they had a strong faculty member in medieval philosophy, and I get to Purdue, and I don't, even though the paper I submitted, and I kind of thought I was going the medieval philosophy route. When you get there, who knows what's going to happen? But it was really no question. I knew I wanted to stay in that route. And they're also very strong in philosophy of religion. And so lots of excellent professors there. Shout out to Jeff Brower and Jan Cover and Mike Bergman. And
Nice.
Peck. I mean, there's, forgive me, I know I'm not mentioning everyone, but they were very influential on me. And so I ended up working with Jeff Bauer, and who was an Aquinas scholar.
Okay.
And I was writing my dissertation on Augustine. So the journey continued towards, I guess, full on, if you want to call what I am now, full on religious. Another step in that journey was seeing, in addition to Kate, people who claimed to be Christians and were super smart. Because my experience with Christianity growing up was like the kids saying, "Oh, if you don't believe in Jesus, you're going to hell."
Right.
And I thought, I don't really have time for that, and that kind of pushed me towards, this is kind of, I don't know, I just dumb. So instead of being eloquent about it, that's at the time, that's how I thought about it. I remember being on the playground in elementary school and kids saying, "If you don't, do you know Jesus?" And I was like, "No, I don't know Jesus." What are you talking about? They're like, "You're going to hell." Yeah, and I remember that day when I left school, I come home and I was like, I don't believe in any of that. That's probably when I became an atheist, probably around 6.
Oh my goodness.
Maybe a little older, 6 or between 6 and 8. Anyway, I was in elementary school. But to get back on track here, when I got to Purdue, I was surrounded by people who were Christians, who were some of the smartest people I've ever met. And not just smart, but good men.
Yeah.
And strong men. And I thought, it just gave me a different image of what it was about. And so I continued with my studies of Augustine, and I ended up writing a dissertation was called Rejecting Physicalism.
What a transition.
That's exactly. A causal analysis of Augustine's argument from presence to incorporeality. So basically, I was highlighting an argument that Augustine made for the reality of non-physical objects, and hence against physicalism, which is the position that says all that is physical.
Wow.
Or depends on the physical stuff. So,
Gosh.
None of that may have, all those experiences and meeting those people and reading those works may have pushed me towards believing in God, but not yet in saying I'm a Christian or at the time I was like, what's that got to do with Jesus? Like, I believe these eternal truths exist. What's that got to do with the Bible or any of that stuff?
Right.
So it was only on the basis of certain experiences along the way that I ended up committing myself to Christ. I don't know if you want to go into this.
Yeah, we might have some time to go over that. Actually, we have approximately 15 minutes,
okay.
But
you want to or not? You want to go on?
I would love to go on, and maybe I'd ask you to highlight that experience just a little bit, briefly. But I might have a few questions along the way. Before you highlight that experience, right, or the few experiences that you went through, I remember just last week, actually, attending an event here with someone who was previously on Sam Harris's podcast, and he's Indian, and he talked about, I think he talked about spirituality and things like that. And one of the things that he said that stood out to me was, he said that religion is the quest for ultimate security. And I wonder how much of that statement sort of resonates with you. Is it that you find that provides you with security, or is it that you're more attracted to the allure of the truth behind it?
So,
and you can tie that to your experience, the spiritual experience that you went through.
So there's some subtlety into how one can answer that.
Okay.
In terms of your physical well-being, I think, as history proves, dedicating yourself to God does anything but give you physical security. Yeah. People were crucified, hanged, shot, subdued, everything else. So whatever it is they were chasing, maybe it's some kind of security, but it definitely wasn't a worldly security. And let me think about it. Could there be some kind of spiritual security? So Augustine and Plato, they would talk about, they have this, especially with Augustine uses this terminology in particular. He talks about the unconquerable man. So the unconquerable man loves nothing that they can lose.
Loves nothing that they can lose.
That's right.
Yeah.
So nothing physical, nothing depending on the physical. Yeah. The only thing, they may use physical stuff, or they may seek physical things towards serving the higher things, but they don't treat anything physical or changing or perishable as like they're an idol or something that they seek in itself. They only use this stuff as means to achieve higher objectives. Yeah. And so if the unconquerable man loves nothing that he can lose and only what's eternal. So God, truth, virtue, goodness itself. Yeah. God being supremely perfect is uncorruptible, is imperishable, is always going to be there.
Right.
Same thing with truth itself and goodness itself. Even if everyone stopped being moral and being loving to their brothers and sisters, there would still be goodness itself that they could turn back to. right? Even if everything's gone bad, the good is still there waiting for us to come back to it. So they're imperishable, they're uncaused, they're uncreated, they're always there. And by loving, or essentially, and this is the terminology they use, like enslaving yourself, being a servant of these things does give you a kind of mental security or tranquility because nothing that you truly love can be taken from you. And that affords yourself a kind of peace. Even if your house is burning down, well, it's just a house. It's not, you had no illusions that it was some eternal thing.
Right.
The teaching gets very hard because other human beings are not eternal. They're perishable.
Right.
So you can't, ultimately, if you organize your life around them and you make what you're living, I mean, this is really hard teaching because it involves like your mother, your father, your spouse, sons, daughters. If you are making the idol of your life, the purpose of your life, serving them and being with them, well, you're setting yourself up. Right? Because we're all perishable.
Truth. Yeah,
we're all perishable. We're all going away.
Yeah.
Okay? At least in our humans are. Maybe the spirit lives on, but human beings are physical, bodily things in part. And then, the Platonists and the Augustinians think that there's the spiritual, your soul or your mind that's attached to it and interacts with it. So I think it's a real challenge. Not everyone, I think, could be the unconquerable man. This does not mean that you cannot love other human beings. In fact, if you truly love God, you would love other human beings because that's what God wants you to do. And God is love itself. And so by loving others, you are serving God. However, when you have some illusions that these others, when you organize your life around them, that's when you set yourself up because look, bad things are going to happen to us all. And so if someone who was truly, I mean, this may be monk level or saint level to actually become the unconquerable man, but that would be full security. That would be full on security.
Yeah.
I'm no way unconquerable, but I'm aware of this. And every day, when I leave the house or my wife gets in the car with the kids or, when they go somewhere, I feel worry. And just because you don't know.
Right.
You don't know. But then I remind myself, you know what? This is the situation we live in. Let's have no illusions on that. And one of my, I think this might go back to Marcus Aurelius, but either him or one of his soldiers preparing for battle, one of the other men said, how you doing? Are you in fear? And he said, I'm already dead.
Oh my.
I'm already dead.
God.
I got nothing to lose here, baby. I've already come to grips with I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And I've prepared myself for it, and I'm living my life as if that's it.
Oh my goodness.
And so, again, this may sound cold or harsh.
Yeah. But it's the harsh truth.
I think there's a kind of elevated way of just seeing this whole world as dead. And in that way, you steel yourself to what it's like. Yeah, something bad happens. Yeah, well, that's the world we live in. I didn't have any illusions about that. The curtain on that with, experiences I've had and seeing various, children get sick and like really sick. You got to steel yourself to that. By acknowledging, as the philosophers are always there to remind us of the truth. And the truth is it's a changing, corruptible world. So if someone was actually able to see the world that way which seem and love and really aim to serve directly and make the height of what they organize their life around the eternal things, God, truth, virtue, one and the same thing, really. It's another story. But I think that could offer some security.
Oh, man.
But see, the goal, kind of the way he puts it, it seems like it's, maybe slander's not the right word, but it's kind of like a dig or something. This sounds like something Freud might say. It's like, you know, God is your daddy in the sky, and he's there to look out for your, okay. Perhaps with some, but to me, the security is not what drives it. The recognition that there's something greater than me, God, truth itself, virtue itself, is what makes me want to give myself over to that and say, I'm throwing down with this and I'm serving this.
Yeah.
And as a side effect of doing that, you get the security. But it's not like, oh, I want to, mentally protect myself, so I'm going to believe in, no, if that's the way that he meant it, and maybe he didn't, then I would, at least in my personal experience, that's not it. It's recognizing there's something greater than me, and that I should serve the best. As a side effect, you get security, given the features of the higher things as eternal, uncorruptible, imperishable. But it's not the driving thing.
Yeah.
My mic went out.
Oh.
All right, we got me back.
You got it? You might want to tweak it a little bit, right and left.
Check. All right, I'm back.
Okay.
So yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Well, that's I think that's one way to close this off. And I know
let's do it there.
I really wanted to dive deeper into that, but I think part 2 might be on the horizon, and we would, talk some more about that and your experience as well. But
I'd love to.
Yeah, I really appreciate your time, Joe, in this conversation. That was just very insightful, and I can't wait for part 2.
I appreciate you, brother.
Yeah.
I look forward to it.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.